At 7 o'clock in the morning on August 29, 1949, a tower vanished in the steppe of Soviet Kazakhstan. The flash came first, then the fireball, the rising column of dust, and a shockwave rolling across the Semipalatinsk test site. The device was called RDS-1. To Western analysts, it became Joe 1. And when radioactive debris reached American monitoring aircraft days later, Washington was forced to confront a nightmare it had believed was still years away. The United States no longer possessed the atomic bomb alone. Inside the Soviet weapon was no magical formula stolen from a single page. An atomic bomb required reactors, enrichment plants, factories, miners, engineers, physicists, and an entire secret state prepared to spend lives without counting them. Soviet scientists had built all of that. But the shape of RDS-1 closely followed the plutonium implosion bomb, tested by the United States at Trinity. And hidden inside that resemblance was the work of a man who had once lived behind the fences of Los Alamos. His name was Klaus Fuchs. He did not look like the central figure in an espionage thriller. He was quiet, slight, and painfully reserved. Friends trusted him. Colleagues respected the precision of his mind. At gatherings, he could fade into the edge of the room, saying little, listening carefully. Yet for years, while Britain and America admitted him to their deepest nuclear secrets, Fuchs was secretly passing information to the Soviet Union. He did not do it for money. That fact makes his story more disturbing, not less. Klaus Emil Julius Fuchs was born in Germany in 1911, the son of a Lutheran pastor. His father taught him that moral conviction demanded action, even when action carried a price. As a young man, Klaus watched Germany fracture under political violence. He joined the Communist Party and fought the rise of the Nazis in the streets and through underground political work. After Hitler came to power in 1933, Fuchs fled. He reached Britain, studied physics, and built a new life among refugees and academics. Then war made him suspect again. In 1940, Britain interned Fuchs as an enemy alien and sent him to Canada. He was not imprisoned because officials knew he was a communist agent. They did not. He was detained because he had been born German. Intervention from scientists helped secure his release, and when he returned to Britain, his rare ability in theoretical physics placed him near one of the most guarded questions on Earth. Could an atomic weapon actually be built? Britain's bomb project was codenamed Tube Alloys. Fuchs joined the team led by physicist Rudolf Peierls and became a British citizen in 1942. That same year, according to the confession he would later give MI5, he began supplying nuclear information to the Soviet Union. His first route did not run through Los Alamos or an American courier. In Britain, he contacted a Soviet intelligence officer known as Sonia, Ursula Kuczynski, and delivered information from Tube Alloys. At that moment, Britain and the Soviet Union were wartime allies against Nazi Germany. But Fuchs was not participating in an authorized exchange between allies. He was choosing alone what another government had the right to know. His justification grew from ideology. Fuchs believed the Soviet Union had carried the main burden of resisting fascism. He also believed knowledge of a weapon this powerful should not become the private property of one nation. In his divided moral universe, loyalty to colleagues and loyalty to communism could occupy separate compartments. Years later, he described a state resembling controlled schizophrenia. One life could apparently proceed without contaminating the other. That division soon carried him into the Manhattan Project. In 1943, Fuchs traveled with the British mission to the United States. The following year, he arrived at Los Alamos, the isolated weapons laboratory in New Mexico. The town did not appear on ordinary maps. Mail passed through a post office box in Santa Fe. Scientists lived behind gates, guards, and censorship, surrounded by desert and mountains. Their task was to turn nuclear theory into weapons before the war ended. 2 bomb paths were under development. The uranium weapon used a gun-type mechanism and was considered comparatively straightforward. Plutonium created a more dangerous problem. Material produced in reactors could not be used reliably in the same design. It had to be compressed inward, almost perfectly and almost instantly, until it became supercritical. That demanded implosion. Around a plutonium core, shaped charges of conventional explosives had to generate a converging shock wave. If the wave arrived unevenly, the core could deform. The chain reaction could begin too soon, and the weapon could fail. The challenge required experimental chemistry, detonators, metallurgy, mathematics, and hydrodynamics. Fuchs worked in Hans Bethe's theoretical division, contributing calculations central to understanding implosion. He was important. He was not the lone inventor of Fat Man, and he did not personally possess every industrial secret of the Manhattan Project. But he had access to a terrifyingly valuable portion of the design. He also had the trust required to move through the project almost unnoticed. The most remarkable feature of Fuchs's espionage was not a cinematic break-in. It was the absence of one. He had clearance. He attended technical discussions. He read classified material because reading it was his job. The system feared intruders, while the man passing secrets was already inside. In the United States, Fuchs was eventually connected to a courier named Harry Gold, a Philadelphia chemist who worked for Soviet intelligence under the name Raymond. Their exchanges were discreet, but the surviving record is less theatrical than later retellings. What matters is not whether a package changed hands beneath a particular street lamp. What matters is that Gold received nuclear information from Fuchs and carried it into a Soviet network. Among the material Fuchs supplied were reports on the plutonium bomb and information derived from work at Los Alamos. After the Trinity test on July 16, 1945, he could also report that implosion had worked. He later passed further nuclear information after returning to Britain. The intelligence was serious enough to help Soviet leaders compare their own program with American results, avoid some uncertainty, and decide which path deserved resources. But here, the popular version of the story becomes dangerously simple. Fuchs did not hand Moscow an atomic bomb, nor did Soviet physicists merely unfold an American blueprint and begin assembling parts. The Soviet Union had already launched a vast atomic program under Igor Kurchatov, controlled politically by Lavrenti Beria. It needed uranium, reactors, plutonium production, precision explosives, testing grounds, and thousands of specialists. No spy could smuggle that infrastructure in a coat pocket. Beria also distrusted both foreign intelligence and his own scientists. Information from spies was often treated as a guide or a check, while Soviet teams repeated calculations and experiments themselves. Some specialists did not know that intelligence material existed. Espionage reduced risk. It did not eliminate the work. And Fuchs was not Moscow's only source. The Soviet network penetrated the atomic project at several points. That makes it difficult to isolate exactly how many months or years Fuchs saved. Some estimates credit his information with accelerating the first Soviet bomb by 1 or 2 years. Other historians emphasize that the shortage of fissile material, not weapon theory alone, set the pace. Fuchs himself believed he had saved the Soviets at least a year. The honest conclusion is narrower than the legend. His information was valuable, perhaps extremely valuable, but no archive can show us the alternate history in which he remained silent. On August 6, 1945, Hiroshima was destroyed by a uranium bomb. 3 days later, Nagasaki was struck by a plutonium implosion weapon. Fuchs had helped the project that made the second design possible. He had also helped a foreign government understand it. After the war, he returned to Britain and rose rapidly. At the Atomic Energy Research Establishment at Harwell, he became head of theoretical physics. He was no disposable operative hiding behind a false profession. He was one of Britain's most trusted nuclear scientists, and he continued to pass information. This later material included theoretical work connected to the hydrogen bomb. That phrase demands care. In the late 1940s, neither the United States nor Fuchs possessed the successful thermonuclear design later known as Teller-Ulam. The early classical super concept still contained profound problems. Fuchs could betray important research, calculations, and lines of inquiry. He could not give away a finished secret that did not yet exist. Then an old Soviet mistake began to expose him. During the war, Moscow had transmitted thousands of diplomatic and intelligence messages using encryption that should have been unbreakable. But some key material was reused. American cryptanalysts exploited the flaw in a long, secret effort later known as VENONA. Fragments emerged slowly, sometimes years after the cables had been sent. Among them were clues to an atomic source associated with the British mission. The source appeared under cover names, including Charles. Dates, movements, biography, and scientific access narrowed the field. By 1949, the trail led toward Fuchs. But VENONA created a second problem. Intelligence officials could not simply reveal in open court that they were reading Soviet communications. They needed evidence they could use without exposing the operation. In Britain, MI5 officer William Scarden began interviewing Fuchs. There was no torture chamber and no dramatic raid. The confrontation unfolded through a series of controlled conversations. Scarden knew that accusation alone might drive Fuchs deeper into denial. He pressed the contradictions in Fuchs's life and suggested that the state already understood more than it was saying. Fuchs initially denied espionage. The quiet physicist who had divided his mind for years tried to hold the wall in place. But pressure was building from another direction. Fuchs's father had accepted a position in East Germany, raising new security concerns about his son's work at Harwell. Fuchs faced the possible collapse of the scientific identity he had constructed in Britain. Scarden kept returning. He did not need to prove every exchange. He needed Fuchs to decide that resistance was finished. On January 24, 1950, the wall broke. Fuchs began to confess. Over subsequent statements and questioning, he admitted that he had spied for the Soviet Union since 1942 and had passed crucial atomic information. Yet even this moment has been polished by myth. He did not immediately reveal everything. MI5's own account describes his confession as lengthy but partial. He withheld parts of his espionage history, protecting some people and obscuring some contacts. The confession, nevertheless, gave investigators a path they had lacked. In May 1950, FBI agents questioned Fuchs in Britain, and he identified Harry Gold as his American contact. Gold was arrested and confessed. His evidence helped investigators move through the network surrounding David Greenglass and Julius Rosenberg. The Fuchs case did not single-handedly create America's Red Scare, which already had deeper political roots. But it supplied explosive proof that Soviet espionage had reached the center of the atomic project. The timing was combustible. The Soviet atomic test had ended the American monopoly. Mao's forces had taken power in China. Senator Joseph McCarthy was beginning his campaign of accusations. Every revelation seemed to confirm a fear that betrayal was everywhere. In Britain, Fuchs pleaded guilty to 4 violations of the Official Secrets Act. His trial on March 1, 1950, lasted less than 90 minutes. He received 14 years, the maximum sentence available under the charges. The Soviet Union had been an ally during much of the period covered by the case, complicating any attempt to prosecute him for treason. The law punished him as a man who had communicated secrets to a potential enemy. The damage extended beyond the courtroom. Anglo-American nuclear cooperation had already been restricted by the United States Atomic Energy Act of 1946. Fuchs did not cause that rupture, but his exposure deepened American distrust and made renewed cooperation harder. Inside laboratories and intelligence services, the image of the harmless, brilliant refugee became evidence that scientific prestige could not guarantee political loyalty. Fuchs served 9 years and 4 months. Released in 1959, he traveled to East Germany, where he resumed a distinguished scientific career and received state honors. He died in East Berlin in 1988. He never offered history the simple remorse expected from a conventional traitor. The strongest defense of Fuchs is also the most chilling. If one state possessed nuclear weapons alone, he believed, that monopoly could become a tool of domination. By helping the Soviet Union reach the bomb sooner, he may have accelerated the balance of terror that eventually made direct war between the superpowers almost unthinkable. But this argument contains a trap. Fuchs had no democratic mandate to create that balance. He could not know how Stalin would use the secret, whether an earlier Soviet bomb would prevent war, or whether it would make war more likely. Nuclear parity did not produce peace in any pure sense. It produced arms races, proxy wars, civil defense drills, false alarms, and generations living beneath the possibility of annihilation. The fact that the Cold War never became a direct nuclear exchange does not prove that one spy saved the world. Survival is not the same as proof, nor can we claim with certainty that he doomed it. The Soviet Union had the scientific talent and industrial power to build a bomb without him. RDS-1 would probably still have appeared, only later, and perhaps in a different form. The real historical dispute is not whether Fuchs created the Soviet atomic project. He did not. It is how much danger entered the world during whatever time his intelligence may have saved. That is why Klaus Fuchs remains more unsettling than a villain motivated by greed. He was a gifted scientist who believed his private morality outranked the laws of the country that trusted him. He could care for friends, contribute honestly to shared work, and betray those same people without experiencing the acts as part of one moral life. His weapon was not only information, it was compartmentalization. The fence at Los Alamos was real. The guards were real. The locked files were real. But the deepest vulnerability was a belief that intelligence and decency, once recognized in a colleague, were proof of loyalty. They were not. So how should history judge him? As a traitor who shortened Stalin's road to the bomb? As an ideologue who gambled with millions of lives? Or as a man whose crime helped create a nuclear stalemate that no government has yet dared to break? There is no document in any archive that can answer the final question, because the evidence would have to come from a world that never happened. All we have is the world that did. A flash over Kazakhstan, a confession in Britain, and one quiet physicist standing between two possible histories, convinced that he alone had the right to choose. Tell us where you draw the line between conscience and betrayal. And subscribe to The Modern Ledger, where the darkest decisions of the modern age are opened, examined, and never allowed to disappear quietly into the archive.